for joining Jim and I for a special episode about hunting history. Where do we get our inspiration? Where do we find it? And much, much more. Sit back, relax as we get ready to dive deep into hunting for history.
Big Duke 6 Eagle thrust. Put on War off. Sing it loud. Into the Romeo Foxtrot. Shall we dance?
You are listening to the Sitrep podcast, your source for everything related to historical wargaming. Whether you are looking for the latest wargaming news, reviews, painting tutorials, or playthroughs, you will hear about it right here. So grab your favorite beverage or brush and let's hit it.
All right, welcome back for another episode of the podcast. And as you see, it is Jim and I today. Marty is in the grand state of Texas, celebrating his father-in-law's 80th birthday. And Chris is trying to get settled into his new home. So that's okay. The two brains behind the operation are here anyway. So we'll go ahead and take it over. You know, the other two are just comedy relief. So let's be
Where are we in trouble if we're the brains?
So I had such great inspiration last weekend on the theme for this show, hunting for history. If you guys saw a little bit of snippets from our Facebook page, you would have seen that I was visiting a Civil War battle site, one that I honestly did not know about. And what I learned is it was such a pivotal moment in the Civil War. And I literally knew nothing about this. And this was the battle at Fort Donelson. There's going to be a show on June 25th. Jim's got a lot of programming and stuff going on. So he's taking a weekend, a break, and I'm going to take over the Sunday program on June 25th. And originally the plan was to do Shiloh. But I'm actually going to do Fort Donelson because, one, it's literally in my backyard. It's about 30 minutes from my house. Two, it is such an amazing story. And without giving too much away, it is basically where there is this unknown general by the name of Ulysses S. Grant, who becomes famous, earns his second star, and creates one of the most iconic terms of the American Civil War. I'll leave that for the video, but it's such an interesting thing, and it's amazing when you look and dive into the history of that event, how it changed the course of the war, truly. From the decisions of the Confederacy, the generals on the Confederate side, and Grant and his generals and commanders. We'll talk about that. Jim, how the hell are you?
Not too bad. I won't spoil anything about Donaldson or Grant or anything like that. So I'll keep my mouth shut as far as that goes. But yeah, let's just say I agree with everything that you say.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be honest with you. I am speechless about, and I feel so lucky where I'm living currently in Tennessee. The really, which is sad or funny. I don't know how you want to look at it. But we'll talk about it when we talk about hunting for history. But I know you've got a lot going on. You just did the D-Days, and I felt bad because I didn't play our traditional, the Dwight D. Eisenhower spiel that he gives before everybody leaves. I still have it on the soundboard actually here. I'll show you right here.
Soldiers, airmen, and of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Yeah, so it's literally this button right here that I still have going on here. So
today we embark upon the great crusade towards which we have striven these many months.
Maybe we should have you record it, Jim, for the next year.
I don't know.
Do your Dwight D. Eisenhower impression?
No, I can barely do my own voice, much less anyone else's.
Good morning, Jennifer. How are you today? I hope everybody's got a nice tall cup of coffee or tea or whatever your beverage of choice is. But I think today's going to be a great show because, like I said, the brains behind the operation are sitting right here. This guy here and that guy there. So Jim, why don't you give us a little rundown? I know you've got a lot going on. Have you been able to do any hobbying outside of your programming? Any
Sit Rep
research?
podcast is my hobby. And there's really nothing else.
I don't know if you can say it's a hobby anymore. It's almost like a vocation, right?
It's 35, 40 hours a week. It's a second job at this point.
Yes, second job. And I know Jen's probably going, where's the money? Show me the money.
Luckily, I make enough at my first job where I can get away with this.
So, yeah. You want to give us a little rundown of what you got on the table? Well, talk about D-Day for a minute. So the program you just did, there was a two-parter, but it was like, what? You said 25, 26 hours total game time?
When you actually sat down, and by the way, that was solitaire. That was, someone who's been playing Panzer Leader for, 35 years, knows all the rules, rewrote half of the rules. So if I was actually to try that with a live opponent, it would have been 30, 35, maybe even 40 hours. Who knows? 40 hours is actually a pretty good estimate because we did do live 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. No, it wasn't 5 years ago. Quite a while ago, half of Gold Beach with Damon and Bruce Lee. And that wound up taking 9.5 hours. That was with one half of Gold where they landed one division. And here at Omaha, I did all of Omaha, which was all of 2 Northumberland. So we have all of 1st of the Big Red 1 and 29th U.S. Infantry. So it's literally 4 times. So 9.5 times 4 is, you're coming up on 40 hours.
Yeah. So it's amazing when you look at the grand scale, and that's the nice thing about that type of game system that allows you to do it, because there's no way you could have done that in miniature. Absolutely no way. I mean, even at 2 or 3 mil, still would not have been possible. I mean, you would have had to rent out at like a gymnasium or something.
The map was like 11 kilometers across, I think. So in 15 mil, well, we actually put it in the video. In 15 mil, the map would have been 350 feet wide.
Yeah.
And 200 feet across. So literally larger than a football field.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, hey, who won?
The Americans, this is going to sound weird. The Americans won, sadly. I know that sounds, unpatriotic, but there were some mistakes made in the scenario design. The Americans, like I say in the videos, it was more of a simulation of how Omaha was supposed to go, as opposed to how it did go. And so, spoiler alert, way too many Shermans made it on shore. All the successive American waves made it on shore more or less on time. They didn't all land in the right place. I had some good drift rules in place, but as far as whether or not the follow-on waves landed at all, is it was way too easy for the Americans in some ways. That's why, like, if we watch Saving Private Ryan, when those boats go down, when those boat ramps go down, and we all see what happens. I mean, Steven Spielberg knew enough history. He got a lot of things wrong, even in that initial beach scene, by the way.
Yeah.
People say that's one of the most realistic war movies ever made. It really isn't. But he did know enough to pick the absolute worst sector of the worst beach. It's not like all of D-Day went down like that. But that part, Dahl Green actually did. And it still kind of looks a little like that. Of course, there are no German bunkers up there. I did travel there. I did, walk all up and down, walk every inch of all 5 of those beaches, actually. And that Dog One draw is still there. There's a little cafe sitting there now instead of a German block and Widerstandnester 71 and 72. But that Dog One draw is still there. If you go there at the right time of day, you have to be really careful with the tides. But it's, you walk 100 yards out that water, and then you turn around or maybe 100 feet out into that water, and you turn around and you look up at the summit of those bluffs. And maybe this goes back into our hunting history thing. Maybe I'll come back to this later, but you can almost hear the hiss of the bullets going past your ear. And you look up at those bluffs, even though there's all like these little French cottages up there now, and it's all overgrown now because the Germans cleared it out for their fields of fire. It's definitely one of those moments.
Awesome.
But Able Company, 1st Battalion, 116th Regimental Combat Team, those are the guys you see where most of them didn't even make it out of the boat. Poor bastards. a lot of that was because of the disorganization of the waves. They pretty much landed exactly where they were supposed to. The problem is nobody else did. George Company, the rest of that first wave, there were 4 companies in the first wave, drifted about a kilometer to the east, and they wound up piling over towards like Dog White or Easy Red or whatever. And again, if the successive waves didn't make it on time. The first thing that was supposed to land were supposed to be a platoon or 2 of Sherman DD tanks. None of them made it ashore. So a lot of the American casualties in D-Day were because of, German fire was bad enough, was because of the way those waves didn't land right. And that was one of the few things that game didn't really nail.
Yeah.
Again, there were some great drift rules, but when it comes to which waves landed and when, that was pretty much all on an Excel chart, and it kind of happened as organized as you think it would happen in Excel, like click, 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 kind of how it was planned, certainly not in the way it happened.
Yep. So, I think, what is it? The Canadians, that somebody get like one, I'm trying to remember this, and forgive me if I forget this. There was one beach where it was like people landed and it wasn't that bad. It was I can't remember if that was the Canadian. There's like one beach they landed, there was light resistance. And then you have the chainsaw. Yeah. You have the buzzsaw going on of other ones. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to get our news stuff up while we're doing this. Gosh darn it.
No worries. I see Damon has joined us on the stream. Damon, we were just talking about you. We were talking about
in a nice way.
The Gold Beach. Yeah, totally. Talking about that Gold Beach game where you and Bruce Lee, Iron Men of Panzerleader, sat on, what was that, either Skype or GoToMeeting or whatever the hell it was for 9.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that was more or less on my time. For him and Bruce Lee, it was like 1 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's a 4-year-old game at this point, but Damon kind of won that game on almost the very last roll of the game, out of a 9.5-hour game, almost the last roll of the dice, with a company of Royal Marine Centaurs, of all things.
Yeah. So, God bless it. All right. Sorry about
that. So while you're working on that, if you take the 5 invasion beaches and you want to measure like which ones were bad and which ones were good, the Americans, by luck of the draw, wound up with the very best and the very worst of the 5 invasion beaches. So if you rated them from 1 to 10, as far as 10 being the worst or most intense, Omaha is clearly number 10.
Mm-hmm.
You have Juneau, which is the next worst one. If you go by casualties and German resistance, that's the Canadian one. That one probably was maybe a 4 or a 5, because Omaha was the worst by far for a whole bunch of reasons. And then you get Gold, then you get Sword, and then Americans also wound up with more or less the easiest one, as fate would turn out, which was Utah, largely because they landed at the wrong beach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where they were supposed to land, that there was a lot tougher German resistance waiting for them. But again, one of those navigation errors, they actually landed, I think it was half a kilometer south of where they were supposed to. And there was almost no one there, which turned out to be a great thing.
So we're going to jump into some news real quick, if I can get my act together here. Trying to get all over stuff in here. So let me share. We're going to just go, since our news guy ain't here, and I have your thing, Marty, right here. This button here, that's the news button, and that's Jim's button right there. But that's okay. Not a problem. We'll just go to our Facebook page here. And,
hello, Rasmus. Thanks for
Rasmus is in the house. So let me share our screen here. I'm going to go to tabs, Facebook, share. All right. There we go. Everybody can see that. Let me check. Yep, so we can. Okay, perfect. All right. So here we are. Wargaming news for Saturday, June 10th, 2023. Rubicon Models continues to produce. They're a machine right now. Just a machine. So once again, a single image showing a work in progress. Definitely World War II vehicle. Just wondering what it is. I have no idea what that could be. Jim, do you have any idea what that could possibly be?
I don't see enough of it. That's a driver's hatch of some kind. Or maybe that's on the turret. Or that's on the, I don't know. You know what that might be? That might be like on the roof of an assault gun or something. Because the surface on which that hatch is sitting is awfully broad and flat.
Yeah.
And totally a guess. I could totally be wrong. I'm going to guess we're looking at the Germans also had sort of that cupola ring. That might be some sort of late model Stug, but I'm totally guessing on that.
Gotcha. Rasmus says who needs the Germans when you can fight the current on the beach? Very true.
So that's a 741st and 743rd Tank Battalions. I mean, 90% of them didn't even make it to the beach to get shot at.
Yeah. So
They sank in the current. Yeah.
all right. So Rubicon like models. There's our buddy Mel Bose. Looks like War Game Soldiers and Strategy came to visit his studio. Gen Con stuff. Gripping Beast. It's got some new crazy guys coming out. I don't know what those are. Ragnarok miniatures. All right, that's the fantasy side of gripping of oh my god, I am so just blanking out today. Knights of Dice. So we've talked about Knights of Dice. Knights of Dice is going out of business. He's shutting down the shop. They've made really great terrain, and he's said he's lost a passion for it, and he wants to concentrate on just playing games. So we wish him luck. Cigar battle mat mock. Cigar box battle mats. If you haven't gotten any of these are the cloth type ones. They're really nice. Really nice. Let's see. Duncan Rhodes doing some stuff for War Master. Yeah. Let's see. Tiny terrain models. Some eBay stuff. Another Rubicon thing. Looks like that. Go ahead, Jim.
That's definitely an engine deck of some kind.
Yeah.
Clearly German, clearly mid-war. Yeah, that's either going to be a Panther or a Tiger. Would be my guess.
All right.
Let me cheat real quick. Okay, it's not a Panther. It's not a Panther. That might be a Tiger.
Let's see. Got BritCon coming up in August. Imperial War Terrain. Spectre has some minis out here. Let's see if we can get this to come up. Spectre reveals the next release. The newsstand has shown us some figures. SWAT team guys. Very nice. Very interesting. All right. Looks like got some baddies and some good guys. Very cool. If you're a Spectre fan, I need to get back into a little bit of Spectre, but it's been a while. Miniature Building Authority, our friends Kirk, makes great terrain. It usually comes already pre-painted and everything. People will say it's a little bit on the pricier side. It is, but you're getting well detailed and painted terrain. So for those who don't have time or the desire to paint, you have
to take your hourly rate and think about how much time you would spend painting that and add that to the price. Yeah. You'll probably come out a little below market value.
Yeah. So there's some nice pieces, obviously, for the Far East and some Middle East, Egyptians. So a lot of stuff there for different scenarios. Let's see. Elite Miniatures out of Australia is doing some Western looking dudes. They're all right. If you're into Westerns, there's some really great Western games out there right now to check out. Let's see here. Oak and Iron. If you're into your, the Age of the Sail, you have Oak and Iron, which is
that's the same company that makes Blood and Plunder, isn't it?
Correct. Yep. They make Blood and Plunder, Blood and Valor. They have several games out now. The ships look good. I know Marty, I believe, has them, and so does Chris. So, nice thing about that, terrain's easy.
Terrain's usually easy. The ships are very difficult, especially if you get into the rigging. The good news, what I particularly am interested in when it comes to Oak and Iron, this is more my scale. This is not where it's a skirmish game like Blood and Plunder.
Yeah,
where you may have one ship, or it's a ground game, or it's pretty much muskets and cutlasses in a little skirmish game. This is if you want to do part of, say, Trafalgar or Chesapeake Capes. When I was interviewing Mike on this a long time ago, he mentioned some of the Barbary Pirates stuff. So, like, literally, where the term, in
Yeah.
the Marine anthem, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Yeah, we've been there before. So, that kind of stuff is definitely interesting to me.
Yep. Marty's in the house. Welcome, Marty from Texas. Yeah. I haven't seen your number one fan yet, Marty. I'm not sure where she is today, but hopefully she'll join us soon. Rasmus says Oak and Iron is nice, not too complicated. I think
Nice.
they look good. Where's the rigging? I don't see any. Do you remember, Jim?
Those
Did you ever
ships
do
are-
the Constitution
Those,
model
those
back in
ships
the
are
day?
quite small. So
Yeah. Well, come on. Any dedicated
Yeah.
modeler, right? Do you remember? Was it the Constitution, USS Constitution model that
Old
everybody did as
Ironsides.
kids? Yeah, and you had to take your string and do all the running, rigging and standing rigging and all that.
Oh yeah, there are people who spend more time on the rigging. I usually built more modern ships. I was usually a World War II guy,
Uh-huh.
and even there's a little bit of like radio communication wire and rigging, but nothing like an old school ship of the line.
Yeah. I've been following this person, Truxler Historical Art. And this is the 45th Virginia at Cloyd's Mountain in 1864. Again, there's a battle I don't know anything about. But it's amazing the work he does. He actually, believe this is the same person, where like some people who are reenactors, he'll create a picture with them as the reenactor in the scene.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but it's amazing if you really read into the Civil War, and obviously there's many battles. You have the English Civil War and all that, but for the American Civil War, because one, I'm living in the middle of the Western campaigns. I have read where literally a father joined the Confederacy because he believed in individual states' rights. He was a dirt farmer. Didn't have any of that other junk that people, and he had an elder son who believed in, abolition and all that. So he went to the North, and then the younger son stayed with the father and fought in the South. So they literally had father versus son, brother versus brother. And you hear about it in history class, but when you start reading about it in biographies and historical, accountments of battles and things, it really hits home that not only did this war divide a country, it divided families. It's just tremendous.
Especially in that belt of states that
Yeah.
you're actually in now. Tennessee was clearly a Confederate state, but right north of you is Kentucky. Kentucky was one of the border states.
Yeah.
Missouri, Maryland. Virginia split clean in half. That's where we pretty much get West Virginia from.
Yeah.
And if you think that, family versus family, or even within a family, that fighting stopped when the war ended, that's literally where the Hatfields and McCoys come from. One was in Kentucky, one was in West Virginia. It's kind of a fault line in our country back then. And yeah, certainly in those states, Kansas over to Maryland are pretty much right along that line. The loyalties were definitely very divided.
Yeah.
There weren't too many, family, brother versus father versus son versus brother-in-law kind of thing going on in, say, New Hampshire or Georgia or Mississippi or Michigan. But even then, like, you would have like a father who was, like, say there were some officers that had come up through Georgia. They went through West Point. They took an oath, defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States. They stuck with the Union, as quite frankly they should have. And needless to say, because of where they were from, they lost all their friends, most of their family.
Yeah.
Because they felt otherwise.
Yeah. If you are here in the States and you've been looking to get easy access to the Too Fat Lardy's rule books, you now have an option with Badger Games. It looks like I have Chain of Command. It's actually a really good game. It does a pretty good job of Fog of War. What a Cowboys, their newest one. And then all their other games. So if you're looking for that, and here's again that Truxler art, I think he does a tremendous job.
Is he taking over for Dan Traiani or whatever his name was?
I'm not sure. But,
he used to be the top American military artist. He probably still is, but he's been there for like 40 years.
Yeah.
I'm sure sooner or later he's going to retire, and we definitely need some some people to take his place.
Most definitely.
I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but everyone who watches the show has seen at least one of his paintings. Even if you're not familiar with his name, he's American Revolution through actually he starts in the French and Indian War and goes all the way up through the Civil War. Pretty much anything black powder.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, appallingly good artist.
So then more Rubicon models is somebody showing off a complete SAS detachment from World War II. Desert Rats. Looks really nice. Their models are just very well done, very detailed. I think they give you a lot of nice.
That right there looks like Long Range Desert Group. I've got some models a little like that.
Yeah.
The truck's probably not exactly the same. I have the Chevy 3000 weights that you saw with the LRDG. But in the early part of their history, the LRDG and the SAS, they work so closely together. It's almost like pulling apart a piece of yarn. As far as there's one of the 20 millimeter braided guns that they put on the back of their trucks. They work very closely together, and it was often difficult to tell them apart.
Yeah. That's crazy. Jim, I got a news item for you, sir. When I get through that, let me finish this real quick. I have yet to see it. Let me look it up.
So yeah, Marty, the LRDG. Often you're looking at the SAS and the LRDG, and it's like which ones are which. They're definitely, especially in late 41 when the SAS was first getting started, and through the Battle of El Alamein in late 42, that little year.
All right. So the gentleman that owns the game Contact Front. Remember when we did the this video right here back in 2019? It's been
you gave one of its earlier iterations a bit of a playthrough.
Yes. So
virtually.
So he was on. I'm trying to think who. What is the name of the company actually that does Contact Front? God's Eye Games. All right, let me pull that up real quick because I actually had a little bit of a conversation with him.
So while you're working on that, Marty, LRDG, that's probably my favorite Commonwealth force, especially in the desert. That's one of the very, very few armies or forces I have in 28 millimeter. I'm usually not a 28 millimeter guy, but I wound up with a LRDG force. The drivers are the LRDG and the payload is the SAS. That's the arrangement they eventually worked out, especially at first, because the LRDG was a desert survival force. They were a lot of desert explorers and survival experts from before the war. And they weren't technically like a strike force. They didn't, they knew how to handle weapons. They had like some basic training, but their real skill was desert navigation and survival. And of course, the SAS was the opposite. I mean, once you got them to the target, they would tear shit up, but they were not, they wouldn't make it to where they were going if it were out for the LRDG.
Yeah.
So they worked together side by side so long that before you get to the end of 42, they had learned from each other to such an extent that the SAS could operate independently of the LRDG and vice versa. The LRDG had picked up a lot of the SAS combat skills. Mm-hmm. They both really became, their own elite special forces, clearly.
Yeah.
They tried to keep the LRDG going after the end of the Desert War. They tried to use them in the Balkans for a while. It didn't really work out. So the LRDG kind of, disbanded or faded away. I think some of them did join the SAS. And of course, the SAS is still with us today.
Yeah. So Marty's right. It's Carl Titterton who had the. But anyways, there's some background. But basically, the gist of the conversation, he was talking about the version 2, and then somebody was asking for a video playthrough, and somebody else referred to our video of our playthrough.
Might not be great because that was a version 1, but go ahead.
Well, that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
And then Carl said, well, I would be careful about watching that video because in his opinion, we didn't read the rule book or didn't understand the rules.
No, we didn't understand the rules because there were problems with the rule book.
Well, that's what I said. I responded and said, well, to be fair, there was a lot of rules that weren't clear. So he responded back and said, I would love to get a chance to talk to you guys and maybe walk through it. So we're going to get Carl on the show,
Cool.
and, we're going to give him some time to show us what he's done to update it and correct it. So, we'll do another playthrough of Contact Front version 2. So
Yes, it's a great game. It was.
yeah.
There were some. I'm sure the version 2 has corrected all those little things where it's. I mean, I've written rule books. I know what he's going through. Where it's like, I know that it's clear, like because he wrote it or whatever. But
Mhm.
when someone else is not familiar with it, is trying to read it cold, it's like that wasn't really clear. And it's not a game design issue. It's certainly not a historical or an expertise issue.
Right.
It's a writing issue. It's a publishing issue. It's a layout issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually a second try through will totally fix that. People used to ask me, when are you going to write down the rules for Darkstar? I was terrified. I was playing Darkstar since 2012. I didn't want to write the rules until 2018, 2019, because I knew the second I wrote it down, it's like pouring concrete. It's no longer this nebulous thing that you understand and can fix on the fly. It's
Right.
now a thing. And there's going to be problems. There's going to be mistakes.
Yeah.
It happens to game designers all over the place. And again, it's not a by no means is it the guy doesn't know what he's doing or anything.
Mhm.
It's not. It's a publishing, writing, and a layout issue.
Yeah.
You got to be not just a military expert and a wargaming expert. You also got to be a writer and a desktop publisher and skilled in layout and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
writers will pick that up. Game designers pick that up really quick. It's just usually like a draft too.
Yep. So, Carl, if you're watching this now or at some point in the future, I'll definitely reach back out to you and we'll get you on an episode of the podcast and we'll see if we can do it. It would be interesting if we could do like a game or game designer of the month type thing, each month, just to add a little bit of variety to Contact and add a little bit of exposure to other ones. But I just thought it was cool that somebody other than me or one of the team referred to one of our videos for, when somebody was asking. So cool. I'd be happy to work with him to create a new video,
Certainly.
Yeah.
We still have all the assets. We could totally do that scenario again.
Yeah.
And if you go to the 7 Days to the River Rhine Facebook group, there's a whole little squad of guys there who are like, hey, I am, playing 7 Days to the River Rhine because I saw one of Sit Rep Podcast 7 Days to the River Rhine videos, and that shit looks fun. Then they're asking me, and I'm like, guys, some of these rules aren't out of the book. I kind of made them up because we use it for a historical setting. 7 Days to the River Rhine is clearly a theoretical kind of a setting, and it's okay. Well, that's how we do it, but the rules in the actual book, say this, and that's one of the great things about 7 Days is that it's got the room for that. But yeah, there are people out there who get back into Panzer Leader. I mean, I certainly wasn't making content when Panzer Leader was in its prime. I was frankly not even born yet. Panzer Leader or Panzer Blitz, I should say, is kind of an old game.
Yeah.
Classic though, still got my 1980 set from God knows when. And there's lots of people who either get back into old games or who try out new games because they, sometimes, see our content. We're out there.
Yeah. And Jennifer makes a good point, Jim. Think how many times you guys complain about bad. I don't think we complain a lot about bad writing. We do point out some things, but I think she has a point. It's amazed anyone is brave enough to write stuff down. I don't think we're that hypercritical, are we?
No, but a lot of people. I mean, maybe not on camera, but let's get real. There are a lot of bad rule books out there. There's a lot of bad rules out there.
Yeah.
A lot of games that like Mom taught us when we were kids. If you have nothing nice to say, don't. There's a lot of games we don't talk about.
Yeah.
40K. There's a lot of games that we don't talk about because
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm gonna throw something out there to anybody listening or watching. I do know news organizations, online YouTube channels that won't say anything bad about every company or review. They would rather show something positive, and if it's bad, they won't show it at all. I don't think that's fair, to be truthful. I am always been in the impression that if me as a general public person is going to spend my hard-earned money on a game, a rule book, whatnot, paints, paintbrushes, whatever is related to the hobby, I want to know if it's worth spending the money on, or is there problems, or is it just a bad product? And if I'm the manufacturer, I would want honest opinions so I could improve my product, unless you just don't care and you're just throwing something out there to make the quick buck and get in and out. So I have no problem in a politically correct, no, I hate that word, politically correct,
Right.
in a professional manner of, saying this is good, this is bad, and if somebody takes offense to that, as long as we're doing it in a professional, polite manner, then why not? That's why I have that thing. I'll spend my money so you don't have to, of products. Which reminds me, I still have a bag I've got to review here too. Now that we got the studio set up, I don't know if you guys can see this. Behind us is our round table.
I was gonna say, are we ever gonna build that Huey?
Yeah, I know. It's sitting right over there. But we're literally, the podcast desk is set up. This is where we're going to do a lot of the stuff. So if I cut to this, you can see this part of the desk here. There's our work surface, soundboard, cutting, and there's a computer over here, and then camera here. There's a camera here and a camera there. So, so we'll get back to that. And then, the table behind us is when we have multiple people present for a podcast or hobby night. So the next hobby night will be Wednesday night. We'll be at the round table. And so we're literally, and then over here in the corner is like the game storage library, whatever you want to call it. So we're almost there. It takes a while to get things set up the way we want it. We wanted to make sure it's done right. And then, yes, because I don't have the overhead camera hooked up right now, but it'll show down. Let me cut over here to this surface, and you'll be able to see, like I have this mini here, us doing work. So, yes, the Huey's coming, Jim. So, yeah. So, like I said, we want to give everybody the perfect opportunity to know what they're getting into, or as a manufacturer publisher, how we perceive the rules. And if we get something wrong, let us know. If we didn't interpret something correct or anything like that, I've had people reach out to me. The guys from Dish Dash Publishing, we got something wrong in Ultra Combat Modern on one of our videos. They reached out to us, and we're only human. We interpret things. Sometimes the issue is how we read a rule or interpret a rule is not exactly how the author was trying to convey that rule.
What I was saying before.
Yeah.
And another issue that's in, first of all, I think when Jen said, think about how many times you guys complain, she might have been talking about me specifically, because I like to complain and bitch a lot. But in all of my videos, I mean, I know sometimes that, people turn on our content, especially our live streams, and they just kind of have it on in the background while they hobby, or they, and if you're watching one of my videos and you hear something that kind of sounds strange, do us both a favor, go over, actually look at the screen, back up about 5 seconds. You're probably going to see one of those little yellow, notes in the corner of the screen saying, correction, I actually meant to say this, or errata, this is that.
Yeah.
I'm doing some of my curse content now, and I completely got Army Group South and 4th Panzer Army conflated. And that led to like 3 historical mistakes just in the intro. And I was editing it last night, and I'm like, I'm not re-recording that. I'm just going to put some little asterisks in the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, certainly what feels right in your head, like, getting it out of the box, from in the box to out of the box, sometimes things get lost in translation. And it happens to us too. It happens to me, not even the gaming part, like the straight out historical spot. I'm supposed to be the editor. Well, who edits the editor?
Right.
Sometimes I got to edit myself and make little corrections in the video text.
Yeah. So, so that's, one of the things when we decided to go to video format versus just doing an audio format podcast. So when Chris and I'm talking about our Canadian Chris Long, and it started this podcast many years ago. Literally, it was going to just be chewing the fat about historical wargaming, mostly moderns back then, right? That was the original premise of the podcast. But then YouTube is big. Cannot deny the power of YouTube, right? And one of the things we wanted to do was do honest reviews. We wanted to look at games. We wanted to play the game and show the struggles of learning a game and reviewing models, minis, whatnot, like this mini here. This is something Chris painted. This is Odin, and I'm painting up Odin. And that's somebody pays a subscription for these minis. So why would we not review it? Because it's your hard-earned money. You only have so much money, unless you're, Jeff Bezos. That's part of the service of the podcast and where we wanted it to go. All right, Jim, let's change course, shall we?
Yep.
Hunting for history. Now, I remember a few years back when you came over to visit in Northern Ireland, you guys ended up going to Normandy. And you got to visit the beaches and the battlegrounds.
Oh, yeah.
What was your motivation for that?
It's just something I've always wanted to do. It's always been on my bucket list. It was 2014, so this was right after I joined that community, and it was you wanted to go there for the 70th anniversary.
Yeah.
We didn't go in the middle of June because it would have been Secret Service agents and bomb dogs. Like every leader in the free world was right there.
Right.
Security's a nightmare. Everything's like super expensive. So. And then where I worked back in those days, their end of quarter schedule was a little different. So July was out. So we wound up going in early August. And spent the better part of 2 weeks over there and hit like 72 sites. We did not sign up for one of those tour things. I don't like those.
Yeah.
I've never really enjoyed those. I'm sure the people that run the tours are very knowledgeable, but they have to sort of package their discussion and material and itineraries to cater to the people in their tour group, which is usually a bunch of, gamer dad retirees who get their history off of History Channel and YouTube. So it's not going to be the best. We struck out on our own, and we saw everything between Melville Battery, way over there to the east, to Utah Beach and the places beyond Utah Beach, and a lot of cool stories. I'll just to wrap it up super fast because there's been a bunch.
Wait a minute, Jim. Wait. I got something for you. If I get this right.
Mr. Oriskany, why don't you warm us up with a snippet of history on this subject? Oh, James, don't make the story too short. I so enjoy a really long story, especially when I hear your wise voice, James.
She has low standards.
You asked for it, sir. I delivered.
I appreciate it. I'll just say that the bocage is real. I mean, it's not like a hedge. Some war games, we're talking about war game rules. Some war games kind of have the same rules for bocage and hedges. No, when they say hedgerows, that's you're trying to drive through this stuff and or drive along the roads, and you're like, I couldn't even imagine trying to fight, some sort of tank force through this. I had this little rental Volkswagen, and we barely survived. So that was obviously 70 years on.
Jen,
so no real motivation. It's just something that I always.
You know what I found? To your example, when you do something on a table, war game miniature table, like the bocage.
Yep.
You model it, and until you actually are face to face with the real deal, you don't really understand it. Because honestly, it's a green strip on a table. There's many ways to model bocages, hedges, and it's like, why can't the tank just drive through it, right? Then you get to the real deal, and you really understand why it is the way it is and why the rules are written. Because you had those hedge cutters that were put on the front of Shermans and back in the day to try and get through it.
Yeah,
How effective were they?
They actually worked pretty well. It's just how strong and powerful they were. So they took like I-beams that they used to build, like the Empire State Building out of. And it was a staff sergeant. It wasn't even like some big engineer. I think he was, a construction guy before the war. And he came up with this little system where he cut some of that stuff up with an arc welder or something. And he basically put these giant, plow teeth thing on the front of a Sherman. And then a Sherman, which was like 28, 30 tons in those days. And this, this cutter probably weighed a ton or two. This is not like going through it with a weed whacker.
Yeah.
At full speed could usually cut a lane, and it wouldn't completely cut through a lane because it's a mound of earth, then it's a hedge, and then on top of the hedge is a tree line. So, I mean, some people use the stuff we use for normal garden hedges, where you take like a doormat, you cut it into strips, you spray paint it green. Now, these hedgerows are sometimes 30, 40 feet high because, again, they're embankments and on top of that is a hedge, and on top of that is a tree line. And it's been like that, for 1,400 years. That's how the hedgerows formed. It's property lines from literally like the Dark Ages. That's why they're so impenetrable, because that root system has just been digging down in there forever.
Yeah.
And what those hedge cutters would do is they would knock down enough of the vegetation where other Shermans could kind of crest it. It wouldn't completely blow through it, but it would clear it to where you could sort of drive a 30-ton armored vehicle through there and maybe not throw a track. Yeah. Or eat a 75 in the belly as how tanks go. They kind of, and then they fall down on the far side. Yeah, definitely a rough battlefield to try to affect any kind of breakout from, for sure.
Yeah. Is there, the theme of this show is hunting for history. And, you've shown an example in your case of going to Normandy to see D-Day beaches and battlefields. Is there anything I would say on your bucket list of where you'd like to go for inspiration for other games or events?
I don't know about inspiration for further games and events, but Piotr and I are lining up. It's a ways off still, but Christmas of 2024.
Yeah.
He's going to come in from Poland. I'm going to, of course, fly over from the U.S., and we're going to meet up for the 80th anniversary of Bulge in southern Belgium.
Very cool.
Now, so, I mean, it's over a year away. Clearly, it's a year and a half away. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen between now and then? But that's the plan for the time being.
That is awesome.
There's a king tiger in front of a hotel in La Glaise that I'm going to kick the tires on. So help me God, I'm going to do it. It's where Pier was finally cornered and pinned down, and one of his king tigers is still there.
Yeah.
It doesn't run anymore, but it's just kind of sitting out there in the parking lot of this hotel.
That's crazy.
It's like bigger than the hotel because, tiny little Belgian hotel.
Yeah.
And then out in the parking lot is this king tiger, and the king tiger is damn near the size of the hotel. I mean, I'm kidding a little bit, but the freaking big tank, that's to be sure.
It would be nice if somebody would, allow them to refurbish it, restore it to its running glory. I think there's one or two running tiger tanks in the world these days.
One Tiger 1, obviously Tiger 131 in Bovington Tank Museum. There was going to be a second one at Kublinka in Moscow. Mm-hmm. They were working on a second one. There's 12. Last I read, this is like 10 years ago. Well, 5 years ago, there were 12 Panthers running around the world somewhere. I saw one of them and saw it driving around. Also on that same Normandy trip. Probably one of the coolest things that happened in that Normandy trip. And believe it or not, there's quite a few king tigers.
Yeah.
There's at least half a dozen of them. I know the French definitely have one. Still in running order. But for some reason, Tiger 1s, and for a long time, there was none. I remember Bovington Tank Museum all through the 90s was working on it. I used to send them money. They would be like, send us a $10 bill, send us a $5 bill or whatever. We're slowly trying to put this king tiger. It took them like 15 years to put that thing together.
Very cool. So the Battle of the Bulge, huh? That's awesome. That is great. So, I mean, no surprise to anybody. So for hunting for history for me, obviously, This is the Civil War battlefields, and I'm just going to share something real quick. This is from the American Battlefield Trust, and this is Fort Donelson. Like I said, we'll cover this in my video presentation on June 25th. But I honestly, like I said, before I went to Fort Donelson, I had no idea about it. I thought I knew. I'm no by means an expert in American Civil War, but I thought I knew about it. And then I've come to learn there's just so much more that I never learned in high school and college history classes. It's amazing what you learn in a curriculum versus what you find out on your own, right? There's just so much more material. But there are if I put 2 items on my bucket list of hunting for history, if I want to go to get the real perspective of a battlefield and what it was like, and one would be Rorke's Drift. Anybody surprised by that one? I really want to go to South Africa. I want to go there and see what the battlefield actually looks like. I have books, I have the interpretation. We've built Rorke's Drift. We've built the terrain, as best as we could based on some maps and things. And I want to see how close we were to getting it right. And I really want to see the terrain of, how the Zulus were able to effectively use the terrain. And I want to go to Isandlwana and see the battlefield there and how much of a difference it would have been if they had corralled their wagons versus the way they did it. Thanks, Marty. And so the battlefields of Rorke's Drift and Isandlwana, they're a few miles apart. So, so that's one.
A lot of people consider them 2 parts of the same battle.
Yeah.
They just usually aren't British.
Yeah. So the second one, and this again will probably come no shocker to anybody, is I want to go to Arnhem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I want to do the whole Operation Market Garden, and
Eindhoven to Nijmegen to Arnhem. Yeah, pretty much.
So again, it was what 30 miles, Jim? Roughly 30 miles. They had to reach 30 miles, somewhere about there. It was not far.
Yeah, it was a little longer than 30, but which is one of the reasons why it didn't really work. Is it was a little too ambitious. But in a car, when Germans aren't shooting at you, you could probably do it in an hour or so.
Right, right. So that's what I'm saying. You sit here and go, "What's the big deal? It's 30 miles. You get in your car and you go." But when you think about, you got cannons, tanks, whatever shooting at you, and you're running in vehicles. So I don't know how fast the Sherman average speed was, but 15, 20 miles.
This is the thing you run into when it comes to operational wargaming, right? Like the different levels, like skirmish wargaming, which is what most of us do. Let's be honest. Some people call it tactical gaming. It's not. If your game is one tank, you're playing a skirmish game. Right. Then there's a tactical game like Panzer Blitz. That's an actual tactical game. Then you get to operational wargaming. There's an inverse law to how fast a unit moves to how big it is. So a division of Shermans, first of all, there's no such thing as a division of Shermans. That division of Shermans is really a battalion or 2 of Shermans with several regiments of infantry marching along behind it. But even taking that out of the context, okay, you got 1 Sherman does 30 miles an hour down the road. 100 Shermans does not do 30 miles an hour down that road.
Right.
A real life experience. We took a road trip way back in the 80s. I was still a teenager. We went from Tampa Bay to Knoxville. A trip that should really only take you, what would that be? Like maybe 10 hours, 10, 12 hours?
If that,
we did it. It took us almost 24 hours to do that because we had 17 cars and 85 people. And, every time you get going, someone's got to go to the bathroom. There's an inverse law to how fast a unit goes. So that explains things like Arnhem. It's one thing to get in your little rental and putter up, whatever highway that is. To actually get, a corps of tanks and mechanized infantry and push. Yeah. And then there's, like you were saying, the other factor. There are these guys called Germans that don't like you very much, and they tend to throw exploding stuff at you, which isn't, fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're blowing up the road. There's only one road. All your supplies have to come up that same road, and the Germans were still shelling that road. There's mines. There's the Dutch screwed it up. Sorry to any people who are listening that are from the Netherlands. You guys really screwed up that operation because they thought they were being liberated. They all poured out into the streets, caused these traffic jams. No one could get down the friggin' road.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that highway, the Hell's Highway, I think they called it, turned into a much longer road than it looks like just running your finger along a map.
Yeah. So, question I have for you: is there any? I know this is going to seem a little far fetched, but are there any preserved battlefields in Russia in the Eastern fronts?
Yes. Kursk is got some sites on it. Prokhorovka is though its own little park. So if you will, Mamayan Kurgan in what is now Volgograd, used to be Stalingrad. They do have some sites sort of set aside. I don't know if I'd call them preserved because they're almost more like monuments where the battlefield doesn't look like it used to. So yeah, they do have some sites, and like a lot of museums and a lot of preserved sites, there's definitely and this is definitely true in the U.S. too. There's definitely a slant to it, like the Prokhorovka Museum, where the climax of the Battle of Kursk took place. Still has a statue of T-34s ramming Tigers, which absolutely did not happen. But it's part of the art and part of the architecture. Yeah. Mamayan Kurgan is now no longer this hill overlooking what used to be Stalingrad. It's now almost more like a pyramid. It's like these four flat sides, and that amazing statue stands on the top of it. Definitely, a place that should be commemorated and preserved. I just don't think it still looks like it used to back in the day. I know Leningrad or St. Petersburg nowadays has some stuff set aside for the 900 days of Leningrad. So yeah, they do have some. It's just tough to get to, of course, with the way things are now, unfortunately. And I mean, that's not a small trip either, even if everything else was, all other things being equal. I mean, flying deep into the former Soviet Union, that's a hell of a trip.
Yeah, it would be. So let me ask you this, because a lot of the games that you play that are non-miniatures based, are hex encounter games. Do you get any value from visiting the battlefields to understand the battle, or does that not really relate to your hex encounter?
In fact, if anything, it relates more because what happens with miniatures is, especially if you're playing 28 mil. I mean, I usually play in 15, so it depends on what scale you're playing at. But the thing with miniature gaming is, even like we play at 15 millimeter on a 48 square foot table, 8x6. That sounds like a big table. It really isn't. 800 feet by 600 feet is what that works out to in a WYSIWYG game. That's like one hex in Panzerleader. Unless you're playing a game like, say, Pegasus Bridge or something like that, where the whole battlefield really could fit in a space that small, any historical detail is kind of lost. The analogy I sometimes use is, say you're looking at a big 4K television screen, and most miniature games you're looking at like 4 pixels. Does it really matter if it's accurate at that scale? I mean, it really doesn't. You have to look at some of the terrain and look at how, like you were talking about bocages before, we have to see how certain kind of terrain behaves. But as far as where this town was, where this railroad was, where this bridge was, in miniature games, this is one of the many, many limitations of the medium. Who cares? Conversely, when you come to a big game like Panzerleader, like Omaha Beach game we were talking about earlier, I've walked those beaches, I've walked those roads, I've driven those roads. That map is pretty friggin' accurate. Yeah. On 150 meters per hex as far as where Vierville actually is, where Colleyville actually is, Saint Laurent. We showed at the end of part 2 where the cemetery is. That cemetery would appear on that map if it was there at the time.
Sure.
And most importantly, where the 4 draws were and how they were shaped and how steep they were. And it's, for a battle like that, we're talking about other battlefields that we visited quite a while ago. We went up to upstate New York and went all up and down the Saratoga campaign. Saratoga, which is now the town of Saratoga, no longer exists. But if you want to go there, you go to Saratoga Springs. You got to walk those battlefields, and that's where now that battlefield's pretty well preserved as far as where the tree lines are, where the fields were. The farms aren't there anymore, but the farms are maintained as kind of like these open grassy fields.
Sure.
But yeah, you in the big Hex Encounter games, you definitely got to. If you can't visit the battlefield, like I would love to go to Iwo Jima, talking about bucket lists. It's just that would be a monster flight, and it's usually not legal to go there. It's technically owned by the Japanese again, and there's a little Japanese naval air station there. It's tough to get through. You have to get all these special permits to travel there.
Yeah.
Other battlefields are kind of wrecked forever. Trenton is under like 30 feet of asphalt now. Tarawa for the Marines is. It doesn't even the island has changed shape. Sometimes people talk about Thermopylae, where the movie 300 takes place. Earthquakes have taken place in the last 2,000 years that have completely altered the coastline. You go there nowadays and you stand on that battlefield, and you're like 300 men could never hold this. Well, what used to be a pass like 40 feet wide is now a plain half a mile wide. It's literally not going to work. So battlefields do change. And you have to take that into account, even if you go to the actual battlefield.
Yeah.
And try and draw a map based on what you see. It probably doesn't look like it did back in the day.
Sure. Interesting. So, outside of visiting battlefields, where do you get obviously for you, a lot of reference material, books and things like that. When I'm looking at history, what I have found, I don't know how to say this, but museums, obviously. I think the museums that are dedicated to a battlefield or event are better than like a general history museum for a lot of things. I have yet to go to the World War II Museum down in New Orleans. I really, really want to go to that one. But in Illinois, in Wheaton, is Cantigny, the former estate of Colonel Robert McCormick, who owned the Chicago Tribune back in the day. Tough Years is in house finally, and he was also a member of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, back in World War I. So they have a museum dedicated, and we've shown it. I think maybe not on this channel, but on Beasts of War. We did a really good video. I don't know if you remember that video, Jim. We did our version of like a what was that show with the tanks video, where we all said this is our favorite tank and this is why, and all that stuff. It was kind of based on Top Gear, so we called it Top Tanks.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen it, but because they have all these tanks sitting outside this museum. I picked the 551 Sheridan as my tank. So
that's okay. No one's perfect.
But you know what? I've got to find it now because the end of it is priceless. Let me see if I can find it. But anyway, so where do you find other inspiration for gaming material ideas?
Well, honestly, like you were saying, from books, I just like reading about history, and what'll happen is a certain part of the a certain part of history will just like catch my attention, and then I'll kind of zero in on it and focus on it if I want to learn more about it. And get down into some very, very nitty-gritty details. Honestly, I've got after like 30 years of this, I've got a pretty good canvas of the kinds of history that I enjoy. Like, I'm certainly not an expert on everything. I mean, nobody is. But even World War II, there's nobody that knows everything. Anyone who says they do is kind of a moron. There'll be like I don't read much about China, Burma, India, because I'm not super into that outside of things like Merrill's Marauders.
Right.
Obviously, I'm very much into like the Central Pacific or the Eastern Front or other theaters, and you get into it, And then, okay, I like this general thing, like say Vietnam. Okay, now I want to read about Khe Sanh, or now I want to read about Hue City,
Yeah.
or Long Binh, and that's where you really drill down into the particulars. I guess what I'm trying to say in a simpler way is a lot of my research and inspiration is now more vertical rather than lateral. Like, okay, I'm not going to suddenly break into English Civil War, unless there's some people at the club who are really into it.
Yeah.
The only time that kind of changes, and it does happen sometimes, is this is going to sound a little strange coming from me, but it's something that I kind of call the Braveheart effect. When Braveheart, the movie with Mel Gibson, first came out in 1995, I'll admit I had never heard of William Wallace, and I saw the movie and was completely blown away. I thought the movie was absolutely badass.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went home and I started reading, and about 30 minutes later, I'm like, that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. If you want to like a thing, don't learn too much about it because you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
But it did, bring something to my attention. Movies are great for that. Television series are great for that. Even like crappy YouTube documentaries are great for that, at bringing something to your attention that you had quite frankly never heard of before. The important part is to follow through with that second step. It's great that little, flashy explosion on the screen, caught your eye. Just follow through with that second step, pick up a book and actually like read what was really going on there. And I almost guarantee you it's going to be 20 times more interesting than what you saw on the screen.
Yeah.
And the good news is that now you're, educated and a lot more knowledgeable about a new whole area of history that you can game in. And then you go and start finding games that deal with that, or probably have more luck, designing your own game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tried to find a video, but I can't find it. But there's a part at the end. There's a what was the tank in? Well, it was either an M48. It wasn't an M60. M48 that was painted with the tiger face on it. Was that a Korean or Vietnam thing?
They did that in a couple wars. Yeah, that could have been an M26, an M41, or an M48. Yeah, they did that for a while.
So if you remember our friend Sam Poots from back in the day, he was sitting on this tank that's painted like a tiger face.
Oh, like the whole front of the tank is like that's Korea. That's Korea.
Yeah. So he goes, and we're doing our best impressions of Jeremy Clarkson and James May and all them guys, and he goes, "I have found a tiger tank." And he points, he's sitting on this, and here is a prime example of a tiger tank. And then all of a sudden it jump cuts to John back in the Beast of War studio looking at the video, and he just goes ballistic, and it's hilarious. If I can find it, I will share it with us. But right now, for whatever reason, it's not popping up in the search bar. But it was a good video. So anyway, but yeah, from books, what I go to like military collectors websites and stuff and look at some of the stuff like uniforms and rifles. For whatever reason, I'm drawn to weapons. To understand can you imagine, Jim? Let's go all the way back to the American Revolutionary War. Okay. Or even, Napoleon. Can you imagine being one of those guys on the line and you have your flintlock, your musket, whatever. You shoot.
Brown Bess. Yep.
Yeah, you shoot, and then you got to stand there and try and load that thing as people are shooting at you. And I that takes guts. That takes guts.
Yeah. That's one of the things you kind of have to watch out for in a lot of movies. Like, one of these days, I'm going to do this video edit.
Yeah.
We all complain about the movie The Patriot. And they have that, what you're talking about, the two lines of infantry with these flintlocks, some version of the Brown Bess or the French equivalent for the Americans, and they shoot at each other, and like half the line goes down, and there's people's heads coming off, and blood splattered on the camera lens, and it's like, how could people be that stupid to actually fight wars that way? One of these days, I'm going to do it where the British officer's sword comes down, they say fire, and it cuts right to the MG42s and Saving Private Ryan, because that's the kind of casualty rates that they're trying to sell to you in those movies. So I'm not saying that it didn't take any guts, but you got to remember, or I should say to our general audience, the casualty rates in those Black Powder era battles were actually quite low. how inaccurate those weapons were. And like, okay, well, why would they line up 100 feet away from each other in like these shoulder to shoulder formations and just blast away at each other? Because they could get away with it. And why would you do that? That's the only way that commanders can control sufficient number of troops. There's no radios, there's no headpieces or anything like that, and that's the only way that you can focus enough firepower in one area to do appreciable damage. The real problem comes in the American Civil War, even before that, the Crimean War, where the technology has advanced. They now have these self-expanding bullets inside. I'm sure you've read about this. In fact, I've got some here recovered from a Tennessee battlefield. These old mini balls. These were, conical shaped bullets with hollowed out insides in the back. And the purpose there is that the bullet would actually expand a little bit in the barrel when it was fired. So you have that perfect seal. There's no velocity lost. It would actually spin a little. You had rifled ammunition. By the middle of the Civil War, you've got repeating rifles. You've got breech loading rifles. And they're still using Napoleonic tactics. We're shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. And very quickly people realize, brother, you can't do that shit anymore, because now people are falling in waves. And that painting you were showing before with the 1864, the Confederates are behind like a log wall. You get battles like the Siege of Petersburg, Cold Harbor, the Wilderness. It's World War I, the prequel. Very, very quickly, everyone started digging in because the firepower is just too intense now. It's the technology has changed, but the tactics haven't. And that's where it gets, you would have, this is a famous little bit, you would have a lot of, especially on the Confederate side, a lot of European advisors, Prussians, British, French, and they would sit next to the Confederate generals with their little binoculars and their little periscopes or whatever. And they would be, what the hell are you Americans doing? I mean, these are guys that read about, Leipzig and Waterloo and the retreat from Moscow. They were used to horrific casualty rates. Yeah. They were looking at some of these American battlefields in the Civil War, and they were like, you people are friggin' crazy.
Yeah.
You people are nuts. A casualty, like Napoleonic casualty rates right here, the Civil War is like percent. Their battles were always bigger than ours, but the percentage casualty rates are insane. Yeah. The technology has changed.
That's so... All right. Look at Jen. She's just spouting out the historical information.
She's doing the old Google foo. M46 patent. Cool. I wasn't sure if it was an M46 or an M26 Pershing, but one of those old Korean War tanks. Yeah.
I have searched high and low, and I cannot find this bloody video, and it's really bothering me because it is pretty. I thought it was a damn good idea. It was my idea. I'll be honest. I came up with the idea, but it was just. We were at the end of Gen Con. They all came over for Gen Con that year. It was Gaz, Justin, Sam, and Ben, and Dawn and I. So we took them over to Cantini, the museum, to see the World War II museum, or the First Infantry Museum. So we thought we'd do a cute video. But anyway, so there's all kinds of sources for hunting for history whether it is to invigorate your passion to do a game or to expand on your horizons for doing a game or historical research. There are some great libraries of historical significance that are not big libraries. One of these little local mom and pop thing might have local letters, local books, local newspapers. So you can really get the flavor of a battle in the area. There's a lot of little shops around, obviously, in this area that sell or promote Civil War material. Every once in a while you can find old weapons, uniforms, whatnot, that somebody had handed down to them from family member to family member. So it just depends on how crazy you want to get. I would love to get a Remington rifle from back in the day. Sharps rifles. I would love to go to the Battle of Little Bighorn. It's another one that I have an interest in. For whatever, I don't know what it is about me, but I always have this thing about the last stands, whether they're successful or not. I think it shows the human spirit at its most challenging, worst time. Whether you survive or don't, it's a measure of who you are as a human being, a man, woman, whatever. So I'm drawn to The Last Stand. It could be as a kid watching all the Hollywood movies. It makes you, rah, rah, rah. But now I'm on a quest to find the real battle, the real story, because let's be honest, as Jim has pointed out many times, Hollywood doesn't always get it right. They fluff it. They make it, a cheerleader thing, or, they make it over dramatic, and it's not always historically accurate. And then when you learn about the truth and how it really was, you're kind of like, what the hell? That's not how I saw it in the movie. So, interesting point, Rasmus. Is a Last Stand successful if all are killed or if they make it? Depends on who's the winning side, right? So if you're on the winning side, it's successful. If you're on the losing side, not so successful. So,
or like, to use Thermopylae as an example, it's the broader context. Clearly, the Spartans were all wiped out. Clearly, they all died. Clearly, they didn't stop the Persians. But again, in the broader context, they bought a lot more time for the rest of the Greek city-states to come together and eventually win. So Thermopylae kind of goes down as a success. Another Last Stand where everyone got surrounded and they all were wiped out is not considered a success would be things like Stalingrad for the Germans or Little Bighorn for the Americans.
Right.
Then you would get Last Stands where, okay, we made a Last Stand and some of us survived because the enemy bypassed us and they attacked somewhere else. Okay, maybe even though you all survived, that's not as successful. So I think it would depend a great deal on the context, i.e., why were you there making the Last Stand?
Yeah.
Benghazi would sort of an example of a failed Last Stand, because the guys mostly survived. They did take some losses, clearly, but they lost the ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
And it wound up kind of being the end of our presence in Libya and our leverage to affect, to any kind of a degree, the events in Libya, and it caused a whole lot of clearly political upheaval here in the States. So, again, if you go by the context, Jen brings up a good one. The Alamo, that would be a tough one if it was successful or not, because it did kick the hell out of Santa Anna's army, and of course the Americans did eventually win that campaign. We come up to the Battle of San Jacinto. How vital Alamo was to that, as opposed to just
it really wasn't.
As opposed to Austin's retreat eastward toward across southern Texas. Yeah, I would probably say that's more towards Austin's operational. I'm gonna deny battle until I find the right battlefield in the right moment.
Right.
I'm sure it didn't help Santa Anna to lose all those people and lose all that time, but that would be a tough one.
Yeah.
Dien Bien Phu would almost certainly be a failure because clearly the Viet Minh won that war. It probably permanently damaged American-French relations because the French were desperate to get us into that, up to and including 4 nuclear weapons they wanted dropped around Dien Bien Phu. No, sorry. We're not going to do that. Operation Vulture and all that. So, the Americans and the French haven't gotten along that well. I don't know if it's just that, but definitely one of the things that has sort of soured relations in more recent decades. So, again, if you ask me, it's per the context, the wider picture.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think as far as the Alamo one, there was no tactical significance to engaging in that battle. Santa Anna could have gone right around it and just kept on going. There was no reason to attack the Alamo. Absolutely none. I think he just did it for his own selfish purpose of, I'm going to just wipe out all the Texans and just keep going. It created a victory for an inspiration victory for, if that's such a word, for the Americans, because it motivated them to fight harder. Everybody, even to this day, remember the Alamo, right? It's been a battle cry for
which
since then.
wound up almost being a bad thing, because as Sam Houston is doing that eastward retreat,
Yeah.
kind of denial of battle tactics, all of his subordinates and all of his soldiers were like, "Why are we still running? We got to avenge the Alamo, avenge the Alamo, avenge the Alamo." Don't ever fight with your heart, fight with your head, especially when you reach those levels of, flag levels of generalship. And well, all generals are flag officers, but once you're on that operational scale, you cannot let your emotions get a hold of you. You've got to fight with your head. Right. And that was almost too good of a rallying cry, because everybody else in that whole army, from the colonels on down, even as lieutenant generals, were desperate to just, when are we going to avenge those people? When are we going to avenge those people? Like, well, this isn't like a popularity contest. This isn't a, we got to get back at them, because we've got to pick our spot and pick our time.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, Piotr, good to see you, sir. Yeah, it's just really no reason. I mean, my understanding is that Austin was supposed to do a delaying tactic, right? Delay, hit, delay, run. He decided, nope, we're standing. The whole famous draw a line in the sand. Anybody that's going to stay, cross the line. Everybody crosses the line. Davy Crockett being Davy Crockett, he's never going to run from a fight. So, a lot of people died there that really didn't have to, but they chose to stand, and, you can't fault them. We weren't there. We don't know what was going through their minds, but, yeah, it's interesting when you start picking apart events of history and battles and go, well, why do we do this? I mean, let's take Operation Market Garden. Love Operation Market Garden, right? Bridge Too Far. Being a paratrooper, it is like our thing, right? Even to this day, guys from the 82nd and other airborne will jump into Arnhem during the anniversaries. They have big anniversaries. That's the nice thing about Europeans. They really observe history.
They take much better care of their history than we do.
Yes,
certainly,
very much so. So, we can look back, pick apart, and go, Monty truly was a bridge too far. We should have done this in steps. We should have, all right, you want to jump in? Let's take Eindhoven. We can get to Eindhoven. We can have, the airborne hold Eindhoven, take Nijmegen, and we'll hold out until, the armor gets there. A lot more feasible. Or you could have even done it in steps, Nijmegen, Eindhoven, so on and so on, instead of just but again, airborne operations was in its infancy, truly.
The airborne part of that operation largely succeeded. It was the ground element that didn't make the time. I'm not going to stand up and defend Monty here, but Monty's most of the criticism leveled at Monty up until then was that he's too cautious. Right. You please grow a pair. He's like, you want me to grow a pair? Watch this. And he definitely tried something daring, and if it had worked, it'd have been great. And again, the broader context. The campaign of Normandy closed at the middle of August 1944, where the complete annihilation of two German armies, 15th and 7th. The 19th Army had been pretty much destroyed with Operation Dragoon in the south. There's no Germans in France. There's a great line at the beginning of that movie where von Rundstedt says the only reason we've survived is we've run away faster than the Allies can pursue us. Mm-hmm. There was no German army in France, so 95% of the fighting in France takes place in that tiny little corner up in Normandy. And once that finally breaks loose with Operation Cobra and the collapse of the Falaise, Gap, it's literally just a foot race. Yeah. So the Allies can be kind of forgiven in the Germans got nothing left. We've literally just chased them 300 miles across northern France. There hasn't been, outside of the channel ports, there has barely been a shot fired against us. They're literally hauling ass. It's not like we're pushing the Germans back. They encircled them, and now there's nothing in front of them. There literally are no Germans in France. Of course, it didn't turn out that way, but it's a lot of hindsight, a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. Yeah. At the time, the Germans were hardly an impressive force in the West. So you can kind of see where the Allies, because again, it was Monty's idea. It was Monty's plan. Eisenhower approved it. So it's not just the British, all the blame doesn't squarely land on the
Right.
British.
Right.
And it was definitely against Eisenhower's plan. Eisenhower from the outset says we're going to invade Germany on a broad front, not this little sickle cut up to the north and, on a very, very narrow front. So it went against what Eisenhower kind of knew, but against his own better judgment, he approved Monty's plan. They saw an opportunity and took it, and it just didn't quite work out.
Yeah. I think you made a good point. The airborne operations that pretty much, other than the British landing zones, went according to plan. We had the hiccups. We had the bridge blown. We had across the River Vaal, those things. But pretty much those went. I think the biggest thing was they just picked the wrong road to go up. But I think that's typical of European highways at the time. To what you and I as Americans would consider a 2-lane road. Here in the U.S., they considered a highway at the time, and there's no way you're going to get that amount of material up a highway, and especially if you're taking fire and you're losing vehicles and it's blocking off. So I don't know.
Very, very low terrain too. We're going through Holland. Half of Holland is underwater.
Yeah.
And what winds up happening is that in order for the road to be successful from an engineering perspective, it's got to be raised.
Yeah.
So now you've got like literal ducks in a shooting gallery, all elevated, and these German 75s and 88s see this line of Allied vehicles that aren't just exposed, but they're also lifted up halfway into the sky on this raised sort of causeway. It's almost more of a causeway than a highway.
Yeah.
And it's just and this is where you get into, again, the movie kind of takes a shortcut. God damn it, you're just going to sit here on the side of the highway and drink tea. Our infantry is still in Nijmegen. You can't send tanks up that road without infantry support. Try that shit in 7 days or battle group. Get back to gaming. Yeah, it's not going to work. So it looks like the British kind of dropped the ball there, especially at the vanguard of 30 Corps. They really didn't.
No.
Because if they had gone there without their infantry, it would have been even worse.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're just coming up to about the end of our show. We thank you all for joining us today and commenting. Make sure you please like, subscribe, and share this program and other programs within our channel with your friends in the gaming world. Great conversation today and a lot of great feedback and everything in the chat. I appreciate all of it. To Jim, as always, thank you, sir. Look for, what do you have tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have some Battle of the Bulge material, followed by some Ancients the week after that. And then we've got your Fort Donelson content on the 25th. And then in July, strap up. We're going into the 80th anniversary of Kursk. There's a lot of content piled up for that. And then we're from that immediately into multiple episodes into the anniversary of Operation Husky and the invasion of Sicily.
Yeah.
Both the British and the Americans are going to be featured in that. So July is going to be a lot of World War II. July of 43, 80th anniversary, clearly.
Yeah.
A very, very busy time on multiple fronts.
Awesome. And guys, remember, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, we will have our Hobby Night live stream for SitRep Podcast Other Realms, which is a general non-historical channel, but anything goes. I mean, if you want to work on some historical guys while we work on Shatterpoint, which is somewhere around here, and I've got to get that Huey done, but that'll be in a separate video. But it's pretty much any goes. We sit and we just talk about whatever in the gaming world and work on hobby and all that good stuff. Now that we've kind of got the studios set up, it'll be a little bit more organized than the last time, but I thought it's still a good show. So join us, if you will, on Wednesday night. For Jim, this is Bill from the SitRep Podcast, and we're going to bid you adieu.
You have been listening to the SitRep Podcast. We hope you have enjoyed the show. Make sure you like and subscribe to all of our channels on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Discord. Remember to join us every other weekend for a new episode of the podcast, and don't forget our other programming on Wednesdays and Sundays. Thanks for listening.